Ever since human beings invented the wheel, we've been using tools to make our life better. And these tools can become very helpful, very powerful. Quite honestly, some of those tools are very specific, but without that tool, there's just some jobs you can't get accomplished without a tool. And in the hands of the right person, that tool can make a world of difference. Now listen, anybody can pick up a tool, anybody can look at it, anybody can use a tool, but when you are the master and you pick up a tool, and I want you to think right now about Henry Ford figuring out how to use the modern production line. When you're a master and you have a tool, all of a sudden, you can do things that nobody else on earth can do. Picture in your mind for just a second, Leonardo da Vinci with a brush, or Bill Shakespeare, because we're on first name basis, William Shakespeare with the Word. And if you want to talk about sports tools, maybe an athlete with a bat. Now, if you go back over history, what you're seeing right now in our modern day hasn't been seen in 100 years, with a player that has become the highest paid player in baseball history, a Japanese guy by the name of Shohei Ohtani. What Shohei can do with a Louisville Slugger, few people on earth can do. Now, he is this really unusual combination, because he's also a pitcher. He's a pitcher that has the kind of velocity that he can throw a 100-mile-an-hour fastball. There's few people on the planet that can throw a fastball 100 miles an hour. And every single one of those pitchers, after they get done throwing the fastball, you know what they do? They go to the dugout and they sit down, and the rest of the players go to the bat, or go to the box, and the rest of the players bat, because we don't expect a pitcher to be able to hit the ball. You just sit there and be nice, pitcher, while we go hit the ball, and then when it's our turn, you go back to the mound and you go throw 100-mile-an-hour fastballs. Not Shohei. Shohei is the kind of guy that with a bat can hit 40 or 50 home runs a year. Few people on planet Earth can hit 40 or 50 home runs. Few people can throw a 100-mile-an-hour fastball. There's one man on planet Earth that can do both. And the first time in 100 years since Babe Ruth, do you have somebody who can throw like that and hit like that? And the truth is, any child can pick up a bat. Any child can swing a bat. Any child can hit a ball with a bat. In fact, you don't even have to have any baseball experience. I could throw you a ball. You could probably hit it with this bat, but only the master can do what he can do with the bat. Only somebody who has that kind of lifetime of work and faithfulness can pull off what somebody like Shohei can do with the bat. This bat right here is a good example of what happens when the master gets a hold of a tool. Did you know that God uses tools? You might not have ever even thought about it this way, but do you know what God's greatest tool is by far? It's you. It's people. People are hands down the biggest, the most powerful. In fact, you're really the only tool that God uses here on planet Earth. And I want you to see how God uses you. Jack, can you click ProPresenter for me for a second? How God uses you, and he uses something that's very simple, very small, and he can use it in a very big way, and it's your faithfulness. Just being every day, day after day faithfulness. Man, when somebody like God gets a hold of that, your simple, your steady faithfulness in God's hands, there is no limit to what he can pull off when you are just simply faithful to him in the small things. That's the simple part of being faithful. And when you're faithful again and again, day after day, week after week, month after month, that's when God can use you in some really big ways. Now, if you're new to our church, we are studying through the Bible book of Esther. We typically take a book of the Bible and we try to learn about God by looking at God's Word. We're in Esther chapter 2 today, and I'm just going to tell you that because God is the master, because God is the creator, because God is the one who brought you, gave you life, He doesn't need you, but he will use you as his tool if you will be faithful to him. And what you're going to see today, you cannot miss this. If you stumbled into church for the first time in your life, if you've never picked the Bible up before in your life, you can't miss today. God has two very powerful tools in this story that we're going to read today. Those two tools are a person by the name of Esther and her cousin Mordecai. And what God is going to do through these two today, quite honestly, is earth-shaking. Before we get to the end of chapter 2 today, what you're going to see is God is going to use two very small, very simple people to change the course of a nation, to change history. And they do it through very ordinary, everyday acts, which means if God can do this through Esther and Mordecai, imagine what he can do through you. So I want to take a moment and I want us to turn first to Esther. And let's look at Esther. Let's look at her simple, steady faithfulness. And let's see what Esther looks like when she's faithful to a promise. Can I remind you of how this Bible book started? The people of Israel have been deported because of their sins. They are literally slaves in a foreign land. They are now living in the most powerful empire that's ever existed on planet Earth. And the former queen has disobeyed the king. She has been deposed from her throne, and God has placed a new queen on the throne. That new queen is Queen Esther. She's a Jew, but nobody knows about her history. Nobody knows her ethnicity. Let me ask you, it is not a trick question. Why is she on the throne right now, ladies? It's not her beauty. Please look up here for a second. She was an incredibly beautiful woman. But the only reason that she's on the throne right now is because she's humble, because she's gracious, and instead of being arrogant and following her own way, she decides to listen to some advice of some people that care about her, and because she's willing to listen to a few people's advice, she now finds herself, quite literally, the most powerful woman that's ever walked on earth up to this point. So let me show you something about the simple faithfulness of a woman by the name of Esther, a Jewish exile that's now the queen of the most powerful empire on earth. Esther chapter 2, verse 19. When the virgins were gathered a second time, say second time out loud. Big questions about why is there a second gathering? When they were gathered a second time, Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate. Esther did not reveal her family background or her ethnicity as Mordecai had directed. She obeyed Mordecai's orders, as she always had, while he raised her. I just want to ask you, if you're Esther, you're the queen, you're living in a palace, do you have to obey your cousin Mordecai? Is there anything forcing you to keep following your relative's advice? In fact, when she was living under Mordecai's roof, it was a good idea. You honored your cousin by following his advice, but she didn't even have to follow his advice while she was living in his home. Now she's living in her own palace. Does she still have to follow Mordecai's advice? No. Why does she? Because maybe Esther realizes the people around me, they may have some wisdom that I don't have. And even though I'm the most powerful woman on earth, maybe it would be a good advice to keep listening to them even after I have become queen. Now, we have some records from the Persian history books of what life was like in the royal court. We know what life was like for King Ahasuerus because it's recorded in the Persian history books. So we have an idea of what life was like for Queen Esther. And here's some things that the Persian history books tell us about life during Esther's time in the capital city of Susa. We know that Esther was the most powerful woman of the land. In fact, in those days, the king had many wives, not just King Ahasuerus, but all of the Persian kings. They took many wives. But the only woman that could have the title queen was his first, his most important wife. The title queen was more than just ceremonial, by the way. She was the only one that was allowed to wear the royal tiara. She was the only one allowed to have the ear of the king. She had her own palace. Did you know that Persian law gave her a salary? Check this out, ladies. She was, by law, given a huge salary just because she's the queen. She had almost an unlimited amount of money for a wardrobe. And she was expected to look the part, which means when she went into city, she had the best dress on earth. She had a royal entourage that followed her on earth. And she was also placed in charge of the women of the court. She was the most powerful lady of the land. But we also know about the rules during the Persian Empire. Everyone had to follow the rules. There were strict rules about the way that you reacted and interacted in society. These rules went for everybody, to include the king. There were things that the king could not do, and the Persian rule book spelled that out. And in the Persian rule books, there was a strict hierarchy, which means you knew exactly where your place was, and you never, ever stepped out of line. Because if you step out of line, it might cost you your head. And ladies, I'm sad to tell you that even for Queen Esther, the average guy had more power, more authority than you did, because there was a strict hierarchy for gender roles in the Persian Empire too. And the queen had lots and lots of power, more power than any other woman on earth. But she didn't have the kind of power that an average man has. And so there's this second, really what the Bible is describing here is a second parade of women. Lots of scholars are trying to figure this out because we don't have a record of this in the history books, so we don't know why this happened. Some people are saying, did all of the beautiful women that King Ahasuerus considered as a bride, did all of those women parade back in front of the king? Did they parade back in front of Esther? Some people are asking the question, is this like a parade of losers? You didn't make it to be queen, so we're going to put you right in front of her so that you know your place and you recognize her place in society. Some people think that this might have been a moment where they were released to go back home. I think that that's highly unlikely because in Persian days, ladies, you were considered property. And once you have been taken into the king's bedroom, now you are the king's property for the rest of your life. It's possible, but unlikely. This was a parade before they were sent back home. Although if they were sent home, they would never remarry again. They would die old widows. Some people think that maybe this was them being placed ceremonially under Esther's control. All right, women, you recognize that Esther is the queen, which means she calls the shots in your life, you don't. There is a lot of people that argue maybe this is an attempt for the ladies to honor Queen Esther and affirm Esther as their queen, but there is credible evidence, there's no way of knowing this for sure, that what we're really reading here is an attempt on Esther's life. That there is a bunch of women from the harem that come together and they are going to attempt to overthrow Esther, attempt to depose Esther because they want to be queen, not her. We don't exactly know what's going on with this second parade of women, but we do have an idea of what's happening with Mordecai. You see, at this point, Mordecai now has a government job. He's sitting at the king's gate. Now, the city gate in Old Testament times, not just in Israel, but all over the world, was the place where business was conducted. It was the place where legal matters were conducted. The judges, the rulers of the land would sit at the city gate, and the witnesses would show up to the city gate. And if you had legal business to do, you would do it at the city gate in front of all of the witnesses of the city gate. This is a deliberate reference to the king's gate, and the king's gate is different. You see, the king's gate is the entrance to the king's inner courtroom. It's where the official government business happens. That doesn't happen at the city gate. That happens at the king's gate. And people are asking the question, like, why is Mordecai here? Because in chapter 1, Mordecai was just a slave from a foreign land living as a foreigner in the capital city. Why is he now sitting? He's not standing or waiting. He's sitting at the king's gate. And it looks like, from the language of the Bible, that Mordecai has a job at this point. And his job is inside or at the entrance to the royal courtroom. Anybody want to take a guess at how Mordecai landed this job? Maybe it has something to do with the fact that his cousin just became queen. And maybe Queen Esther helped Mordecai land this job. What I'm trying to say, I think you guys already know this, but I just want to say it out loud anyway, is that loyalty goes both ways. Here's what I mean by that. Esther is being loyal to Mordecai and helping Mordecai out because Mordecai is also being loyal to Esther. Lots and lots of people believe the reason why he has this government job is because Mordecai loves his cousin. He wants to keep taking care of her. He wants to keep an eye on her, even though that she's the queen. He wants to stay close to her. And the reason why Esther helps Mordecai out is because she's loyal to him. The reason why Mordecai is staying close to Esther is because he's loyal to her. How many of you want to work in an environment, be in a relationship where loyalty goes both ways? I should say it this way. How many of you have been in a situation where it doesn't go both ways? See, I had a chance like that. Well, actually, I'm the beneficiary. I benefited from loyalty that goes both ways. See, as a Ranger NCO, when I was a squad leader in the Ranger Regiment, I made a stupid mistake. I made a mistake that I never should have made as a squad leader, and that mistake should have got me fired. I knew it should have got me fired. My boss called me in his office, and he said, "Yeah, Jeff, that was monumentally stupid. What were you thinking?" And quite honestly, no matter what I was thinking, it doesn't undo what I just did. So he said, "Yeah, I got to go to the boss. I got to go to my boss now, who has already told me it's time for me to fire you because of this one simple mistake. And he's right. I should have been fired." And I'm waiting and waiting all day long. And at the end of the day, he comes back and he said, "Jeff, although you really should lose your job for what you did today, I went to bat for you. I fought for you, and we're not going to fire you. I'm going to keep you around. And I just want you to know that I didn't deserve that man's loyalty. He probably should have fired me. But when he said, I went to bat for you because I believe in you, because I want to keep you around here, because I think that there's still some good that you can do for this unit, that's the moment that I decided I will be loyal to this guy no matter what he asks of me. Because he stuck his neck out for me, I'm going to stick my neck out for him. Because loyalty is supposed to go both ways. That's the kind of relationship that happens when two people love each other. And I just want to challenge you. One of the reasons why Esther is able to be loyal to Mordecai, even after she's queen, even when she has her own palace, even when she's sitting on the royal throne, is because for her, it's not a small thing. In fact, if you paid close attention to the end of verse 20, if you look back at it, you're going to see the answer. See, Esther had a lifetime of being simple and being faithful in the small things, the steady things, day after day. This was part of Esther's upbringing. This was the person that she was. And because she was able to be faithful at home in the small things with Mordecai, now when she's living in the palace, in the big things, it's a no-brainer for her to be faithful. What I'm trying to tell you is that your faithfulness tomorrow in the little stuff is the training. It's the preparation for you to go out there and to be faithful in the big stuff in the future. And if you're not faithful with the little stuff tomorrow, you won't be faithful with the big stuff in the future. That's not my words. Those are Jesus's words when he says, anyone who is faithful in the little things, I will give them bigger things. Esther is being faithful, and Esther is one of God's tools, and it's not her beauty. It's her faithfulness that God uses. But Mordecai is also being faithful. And Mordecai is being faithful to his king. So let's look at the kind of man that Mordecai is. And I just want to remind you that Esther never in a million years anticipated becoming the queen of Persia. Mordecai could never anticipate that he would end up working in the king's courtroom. I am 100% certain that they never saw a moment where something like what we read next could happen. But what you see next not only changes their future, it not only saves their entire nation, quite literally, what we see next changes the history books. Look at what happens starting in verse 21 behind the scenes in the book of Esther. During those days, while Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, Bigthan and Teresh, not T-Rex, but Teresh, two of the king's eunuchs who guarded the entrance, became infuriated and planned to assassinate King Ahasuerus. I want to pause for just a second. If you're Mordecai, do you care? In fact, do you even really want to be in this kingdom if you're Mordecai? Would you rather be in your homeland in Jerusalem than as a foreigner in Persia? Do you even care about this king if you're Mordecai? No. But look at what Mordecai does. When Mordecai learned of the plot, he reported it to Queen Esther, and she told the king on Mordecai's behalf. Now, it appears that Esther didn't take credit for this. She reminded the king, I didn't discover this plot, Mordecai did. And when the report was investigated and verified, both men were hanged on the gallows. This next sentence just looks like a footnote in the history books until it's not. This event was recorded in the historical records of the king's presence. All right, there's an assassination attempt. This assassination attempt is talked about somehow, some way in Mordecai's presence. And obviously, these two guys don't realize Mordecai's relationship to Queen Esther because Esther's kept her mouth shut. She's been faithful in this little thing. And now Mordecai has heard something, and he doesn't have to tell anybody. In fact, he might hate this king for taking my cousin out of my home and dragging her away, quite possibly against her own will, to become his queen. He could just sit back and let the assassination happen, but he doesn't. You know why? Because it's the right thing to do. And not the right thing for the king. This is the right thing to do if you call yourself a follower of God. So what Mordecai does is warn Esther, who goes and tells the king. And y'all, this is no small thing, because these two guys are the equivalent of the king's Secret Service detail. This is the president's own personal Secret Service detail attempting to assassinate him. We know that these two guys, their job, because we have the historical records, we know that their job was to guard the king's own living quarters. They were literally two of the closest men, the most trusted two men in the entire kingdom. And just so you know, this isn't a one-off. Persian kings, great kings, their life was in danger every day that they were on their throne by their own family who would kill them so that they could take the throne, let alone by an enemy. So you had very, very few people that you can trust. Hey, fun fact, it doesn't ever show up in the Bible. Do you know how King Ahasuerus actually dies? He dies in his own bed. He is murdered by his own personal security detail in his own bed much later after this Bible book is over with. The king already knows his life is in danger, and he can only trust it to a few people, and two of those people that he trusts decide, we're going to kill him. And Mordecai hears it. And this is not just high treason, but this is high treason by your two closest people. Now, what happens next in the Bible is fascinating, because there is tons of backstory here, and we don't get any of it. We just get this simple, hey, by the way, there's an assassination attempt. By the way, Mordecai heard it. By the way, he told Esther. Esther told the king investigated it, and they found these two guys guilty. When these two guys were found guilty, the king executed them and hung them on a gallows. That could mean that they were nailed to a tree. It could mean that they were impaled on a spike. What it definitely means is that the king put their dead bodies on display for everybody in the capital city to see. This is what I'm going to do to you if you attempt to assassinate me. Fun fact, we don't really know who wrote this Bible book. But the way that these words are written at the end of chapter 2, we do know that this book was written after the fact. Let me tell you why this is important. There's 3 possible people that wrote this Bible book. One of them is a Jewish scribe, probably a priest, who lived through these events because they were living in Persia at the time, and they kept a record of it because what happens at the end of this book is still important today in modern day Israel. Maybe it was a Jewish priest that wrote this book. Other people think that it was Mordecai himself who wrote this book. But there is a group of people out there, I tend to think that they might be right here, that believe Esther herself wrote this book. This may be, quite literally, the only book in the entire Bible written by a woman. And the reason why this is important right now is because when they're writing this record, they're almost treating it like, hey, it's no big deal. Just a thing that happened. We found out about it. We told the king about it. He took care of it. You know what? Put it down in the footnotes of this history book, the history book that still exists called The Days of the Records of, or the Record of the Days and the Times. This is the Persian records of what happened to King Ahasuerus and the other Persian kings, what was going on in the court at the time. And the king makes a note. There was an assassination attempt. A guy by the name of Mordecai, don't even know who this dude is, but he found out about it. He told me, I'm alive today because of Mordecai. That's kind of how this is recorded for us. And it's recorded as a really, really small thing. No big deal. Except that this small thing literally saved an empire. It literally changed the course of Israel's history. And people still today can point back to this moment as a pivotal moment in their lifetime. But when Mordecai was going through it, when Esther was in the middle of it, do you think that it made any significance to them at all? Just a thing that happened, and I did the right thing, and put it in the records and move on. See, what I'm trying to say is this totally unlikely foreign guy saves an empire. This completely unlikely foreign girl becomes the most powerful woman on earth, and she will rescue her nation, and she will save the Persian dynasty just by being faithful, just by doing the right thing. And she can, or you can, just like she can. Don't believe me? I'll prove it to you. There was a young girl, a foreigner, who wanted to make a difference, so she left her home. And she went to where people were in need. She went to where there was great need. There was a family living right next to her, a mother and some children. They were literally starving to death. She didn't have much, but she said, listen, I'm going to offer my lunch to you. All that I have today for lunch is a sandwich, and your family will die if they don't eat something. So I'm going to give my sandwich to you, and I'm going to go hungry today. What happens next is written and well documented. The mother of this family, instead of taking the sandwich, instead of splitting it up among her children, she cuts the sandwich in half. This woman is blown away by it. She takes half of the sandwich next door and she hands it to the family next door that are also starving to death. And she feeds the family next door with half of a lunch sandwich, the only thing that's keeping her alive. The woman who witnessed this was so blown away by it that she made a decision. I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to take care of people like this. This woman made a famous statement. In fact, it's written down, and people have recited this around the world. She said, not all of us can do great things, but we can do small things with great love. And when God's got a hold of a faithful, simple tool like Mother Teresa, it'll change the world. You see, what Mother Teresa saw when this mother split a sandwich in half and handed it to her neighbor caused her to dedicate the rest of her life to Calcutta, India. Not just to the starving, not just to the dying, but she started orphanages. She opened up shelters. Today, the Missionaries of Charity, Mother Teresa's organization, serves people in more than 130 countries, and she was a nobody from nowhere who just simply offered her sandwich. And when she saw that kind of love, that kind of simple faithfulness, it touched her heart, and she touched the world. Listen, God doesn't use brushes. He doesn't use baseball bats. He doesn't use words. He doesn't use work. He uses simple, faithful people like you, people like Esther, people like Mother Teresa. And if God can use a tool like that, He can use a tool like you. But I need you to understand something before we wrap this thing up. Today is a sermon about faithfulness, but it's not your faithfulness that matters. I said it at the beginning. It's God's faithfulness. You see, what the gospel says is God was faithful to you even when you were unfaithful to Him. And you don't deserve the kind of love. I don't deserve the kind of faithfulness that He would show me because I turned my back on Him. I broke His rules. I deserve His punishment. But instead of punishing me, God loved me. God was faithful to me. And the reason why you and I are faithful to Him today is not for His love. It's because of His love. Because He loved me, because He was faithful to me, because He was gracious to me when I didn't deserve it, now I want to be faithful to Him. And I don't do it to earn His love. I do it because I already have received His love. And this week, you're going to have a chance to be faithful to Him. Maybe somebody in this room, maybe somebody who's listening online, and you need to turn the biggest thing in your life over to Him. You need to turn your soul over to Him. You need to surrender yourself to Him today. And if that's you, I'm going to pray for you in just a second. But for the rest of God's people, those that have already nailed down their reason for following Jesus, their reason for pushing back darkness and being faithful, my challenge for you, the biggest thing that you can do this week is just to be faithful in the small stuff. And when you're faithful in the small stuff, again and again and again, it can make a big difference in somebody's life. I'm living proof of it. And when you do that, you can go out and make an impact. And right now, you know somebody, maybe more than a few people, that need to hear about King Jesus. They need to hear about Him on Easter. Would you start praying right now and asking God who can come to church with you, who can watch at your house, who you need to talk to and invite to just start to get connected to Jesus in a few weeks on Easter Sunday? Would you just bow your heads for a second? I'm going to wrap this thing up with a prayer. And then you're going to hear a few announcements this morning. God, you're faithful to us when we don't deserve it. You're good to us in spite of our failures, our sins, our mistakes. And what we deserve is your punishment, and what you give us instead is your love. And God, today I'm praying that somebody experiences that love for the first time. And the only way that that's possible is for them to completely remove themselves from the equation, for them to completely surrender, to totally turn themselves over to you. So would you cause somebody at home or maybe in this room to lay their self down and to surrender their life to you by just simply praying silently right where they're at? God, forgive me. God, would you hear this prayer, because I don't even deserve your love, but I believe that you were good to me, you were faithful to me, you got me to where I am now, even though I don't deserve it. And God, here I am. Today I am turning from myself. I'm turning from my sins, and I'm trusting you. The blood that Jesus shed on the cross, I am trusting that as payment for my sins. His miraculous resurrection 3 days later, I'm trusting that as the promise that I will have eternal life one day, even after they lay my body in the ground. So God, today, would you hear a prayer like that, a silent surrender from somebody at the soul level? Would you change them? And would you make them into a new creature, a new creation? Would you make them born again, to use Jesus' own words? For the rest of your people, we're going to go through some ups and downs this week, and quite honestly, most of it's going to feel mundane and insignificant. But would you help us to do the right thing? And to do the right thing because we want to honor you, not for anybody else's sake. Would you take our small, simple faithfulness, and would you use it as a powerful tool to accomplish your plan and help us to push back darkness in this community, around our country and all over the world. God, take what happens now as a sacrifice or a gift to you. It's not between them and me, anybody who's watching in this church. This is entirely between them and you. God, would you be glorified because of the way that your people are surrendering to you right now? Maybe for the first time, or maybe all over again this morning. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.